What occurs when Hollywood's most mysterious star meets for what should be a typical interview only to find himself face to face with a host who appears set to devastate his reputation in front of the cameras? What ensues is a confrontation so incendiary, so primal that it renders an entire studio audience speechless, and culminates with security being called in to remove one of cinema's largest names from the set. This is the tale of Johnny Depp's disastrous appearance on The View and how Whoopi Goldberg transformed what could have been a publicity interview into a personal grudge that stunned the world of entertainment. Before we'll get into this amazing tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below sharing with us what you believe actually went down behind scenes. Now, let's get to it. The morning began like most any other at the View Studios in New York City. Johnny Depp had flown in just for this interview to help publicize his new independent film, a passion project that signified his comeback to serious, dramatic acting after years of courtroom battles and media scrutiny. His publicist had specifically asked for their view because they wanted to show that would let Johnny B himself talk about his work, his journey, and his redemption story. What they got was something else entirely. Whoopi Goldberg had been having what her staff diplomatically referred to as one of her Tao days. She had come to the studio that morning already in a bad mood, snapping at makeup artists and berating production assistants over minor details. Some of the crew members later confessed they had never seen her so upset before a show. Some attributed it to a harsh review her latest work had gotten just days before, while others speculated about behind-the-scenes ongoing dramas with network executives. Whatever the reason, Whoopi was ready for battle. When Johnny came to the studio, he was as usual, charming, self-welcoming everyone from the security guards to the catering staff with heartfelt warmth. He took time to talk with the other hosts and regale them with stories and have them in stitches with his characteristic wit and self-deprecating humor. Joy Behar later called him totally delightful and one of the kindest guests we had ever had. Sarah Haynes said he complimented her jewelry and asked intelligent questions about her children. Even the normally subdued Sun Nooney host was found laughing at his anecdotes about life on different film sets. But Whoopi was pointedly moot during pre-show mingling, while the other hosts were obviously having a ball with Johnny. She sat in helpless, going through her notes with an intensity that made anyone within earshot feel uneasy. When someone came over to talk about the nature of the interview, she dismissively waved them away, grumbling something about not having to be instructed about how to do her job. The opening off show proceeded smoothly enough. Theos chatted day's top topics with their signature belt of humor and fiery argument, but there was a sense of tension beneath that. Regular viewers may have sensed Whoopi was more aggressive than normal, even with her co-hosts cutting them off more often and dignitying their viewpoints with barely repressed annoyance when introducing Johnny Depp. The other hosts were actually enthusiastic. Joyce's introduction was hearty and effusive, citing his phenomenal career lasting decades and his status as one of the most talented actors of his generation. She spoke of his classic roles, his singing abilities, and his recent artistic revival. The crowd clapped wildly as Johnny emerged, waving his trademark smile and giving a slight wave. He settled into the guest seat with his trademark relaxed sophistication, a leg over the other, and leaning back ever so slightly. He wore a plain black blazer over an old band t-shirt. Signature rings, glinting studio lights. His hair was tied back in a casual ponytail, and he seemed relaxed and ready for whatever he expected would be a pleasant discussion of his work. Johnny Depp, everyone, Joy said with warm sincerity. Thank you so much for coming. We are great fans. The pleasure is all mine. Johnny answered, his voice having that familiar slight rasp that had delighted audiences for decades. I've always had a lot of respect for what you ladies do here. It takes real courage to tackle the tough subjects day after day. Sarah Haynes jumped in with first question, asking about his latest film and what drew him to the project. Johnny's face lit up as he began describing the character. A broken man seeking redemption who finds unexpected hope in the most unlikely circumstances. He spoke passionately about the script, director's vision, and the incredible cast he had worked with. His enthusiasm was infectious, and you could see theater host really connected with his responses. It sounds like a real personal project for you. Sunny marked, Was there something particular about this character that spoke to your own experience, Joni? Hesitated thoughtfully, obviously whying. How much of himself to share? I believe anyone who has endured serious struggles in their life, anyone who had to rebuild themselves from scratch can relate to this character's path. It is about discovering your true self again after thought. The world has attempted to inform you who you're supposed to be. The crowd was leaning in word for word. This was the Johnny Depp they knew and adored, deflective, contemplative, and human to the core. The other hosts were visibly to shed his candor, and the interview was evolving into precisely the sort of substantive discussion his publicists had been hoping for. But then Whoopi spoke, for the first time since the intro. That is a very convenient narrative. She spoke, her voice slicing through his studio like a knife. The room's temperature appeared to fall in an instant. But let us discuss what actually took place. One, you were having your very public court hearings. Do you expect us to seriously bail you vo? Are the victim in all of this? The other hosts were stunned. This was not on the agenda for the interview questions. Johnny's demeanor changed slightly, but he kept his cool. I believe the court hearing said it all. Whoopi, I'm here today to discuss my work on this movie that I am extremely proud of. Oh, but your work and or our life are not distinguishable. Arethi. Whoopi pressed, leaning forward. Aggressively, your actions had an impact on every honor around you. Your co-stars, your crew, your family. How do you explain that? The studio audience was totally quiet now. You could feel the awkwardness emanating from everyone there. Joy attempted to jump in with a redirect, but Whoopi raised her hand to silence. Her Johnny breathed deeply, obviously trying to preserve his dignity. I have never said I was perfect, and I've owned my errors. Beauty, I'm not going to sit here and be ambushed with things that have already come out. Awkward ambushed. Whoopi laughed. No one was laughing about this. There's accountability something. You have difficulty with you want to come on TV and hawk your redemption tale, but you do not wish to actually confront the tough questions. I have already had my share of tough questions. Johnny responded, his voice steady but his jaw clenching a little. What I will not do is become a part of a character assassination masquerading as journalism. The tension was getting to be too much. Sarah Sunny shared anxious glance while Joy appeared as though she wanted to crawl under the table. The producer's sin. The control room were busily debating whether to go to commercial about. Whoopi was just getting going. Tractor assassination. She parroted, her voice rising. You did thought to yourself, you want sympathy, you want understanding, then start by being honest about the damage you caused. Johnny leaned forward now, his famous composure at last beginning to crack. Thinly damage. I see right now is what you are trying to do to this conversation. I came here in good faith to talk about my art, about a project that meant of everything to me, and you've made it some sort of personal vendetta. Personal vendetta? Whoopi fired back. I didn't know you personally, Johnny Depp, but I do know your actions impacted real people, and those people deserve better than your masterfully spun public relations camping. The other hosts were now tactically attempting to step in, but both Johnny and Whoopi were embroiled in their argument, seemingly oblivious to everything else going on around the mew. Want to talk about impacting real people? Johnny declared, his voice to Kingin edge for the first time. What a booth. People who had faith in me stood by me during the darkest phase of my life. What about the fans who never gave up faith in my innocence? What about the truth? Whoopi, does it concern you at all, or are you solely concerned with ripping people apart? Whoopi bashed her hand on the table, making everyone all leap. Do not preach to me about truth, you man. I have been doing this business longer than you've been alive. I recognize a manipulation when I see it, and I recognize a performance when I see one at the moment. EOM, watching both the audience gasped ably. This was well-postponed comfortable television. This was getting genuinely hostile. Johnny rose to his feet slowly, his movement slow and deliberate, in spite of the obvious rage growing within him. Believe that we need to step back from this. Johnny spoke, his voice in danger of being silent, standing there. The studio lights throw shadows on his face, intensifying his look. I was here as a guest with respect for this program and for you individually. Whoopi, respect, though, is a two-way street. Whoopi, she leaned back in her chair with a sneer that ran shivers through, witnessing. Now you're going to speak of respect that is rich coming from someone you displayed so little respect to Thepipool in his own life. Joy struggled desperately to take charge of the situation. Perhaps we should discuss the film itself, she interrupted her, voice trembling swiftly. Can you tell us a bit about working with the director? But Whoopi was not through. She turned to Joy with a stare that could have been enough to freeze water. No, Joy, we are going to complete this conversation. I am fed up with celebrities appearing on this show, believing they are able to dictate the narrative. This is not some fluffin' tournament. Magazine piece. Johnny slowly sat back down, but his attitude was totally different now. Where previously he had been relaxed and open, he was now coiled tightly like a spring. You know what, Whoopi? You are completely right up a Tony thing. This is not a puff piece. This is something considerably worse. This is a hit job Whoopalod. But the noise was harsh and grating. I am asking you legitimate questions that any real journalist would ask. If you cannot handle that, maybe you should not be doing interviews. Legitimate questions, Johnny repeated, his voice getting louder. You have not asked me a single question about my work, about my craft, about the things that actually matter. You have done nothing but attack me personally from the moment I sat down. That is not journalism. That is bullying. The term bullying hung in the air like a thunderclap. Whoopi's face grew dark. Instant line. You could see the rage forming behind her eyes. Did you call me a bully? She said, her voice lowering to a deadly whisper. Me, I am not the one with a record of unstable conduct. I am not the one who has restraining orders put in against me. I am not Theon, whose own bodyguards have had Toggett involved in home affairs. Johnny's face turned white as a sheet. Some of the audience members made it known, and Sunny host looked like she would bail. This was crossing every boundary of professional behavior, and everyone in the studio knew this. How dare you? Johnny's voice was barely contained. Those claims were disproven in court. You know that everyone knows that you are intentionally spreading lies on television. I am stating facts. Whoopi fired back. Court documents are public. Recorder on cell phone text messages were read out. Ludan, that courtroom. Do you want me to read some of them to our audience, Sarah? Haynes did get up at this point, something that had never occurred in the show's history. Whoopi, I believe one need to just move on to something else. This is getting out of control. But Whoopi on her with the same hatred. She had been focusing on Johnny. Sit down, Sarah. This is my show, and I will produce though I see fit. If you do not like it, you can leave. To the brutality of Thatman was stunning. Sarah slowly got back into her seat, her face flushed with embarrassment and danger. Joy was gazing at Whoopi as though she had never seen her before. While Sunny was openly shaking her head in disbelief, Johnny caught sight of what was going down, and his expression inged from anger to something else, almost guarding. Don't speak to them like that, he told her. They are attempting to do their jobs. They are attempting to save what you have made a mess of. If you wish to attack someone, attack me. Leave them alone. No. How virtuous, Whoopi said derisively. The noble Johnny Depp, protector of women, where waste that virtue when it counted. That is enough. Johnny stood up once more, at this time with absolute finality. I've southern endured your abuse because I thought, perhaps, maybe they're awesomely useful to be derived from this exchange, but you are no interested in truth. You are no interested in accountability. You are no interested in entertainment. You are interested in destruction. Pure and simple. Whoopi stood up to equaling his energy. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. This is what real lactobetty looks like. This is what happens when your actions have a consequences. My actions, Johnny's voice was rising now, his famous composure finally cracking. Completely what? Treating your own co-hosts. What about the way you are retreating your audience? You are supersedo.
It is.
Be a professional, someone people look up to, and you are behaving like a schoolyard bully with a personal grudge. Whoopi was practically. Now, I don't know a personal grudge to know a manipulator when I see one. I don't know a personal grudgito denounce someone who believes their fame allows them to get away with hurting people. The only one hurting Pete this moment is you, Johnny replied. Look around you, Whoopi. Look at your co-hosts. Look at your audience. Look at your own crew. Every single person in this room is nervous about what you're doing right now. Everybody but you and he was correct. The camera operators were trading anxious stares. The producers swore desperately, whispering into their headsets, and the audience was sitting in silent shock. Some people in the front row were actually leaning away from the fight as if attempting to insulate themselves from the poison giving the studio. Whoopi glanced around the room and appeared to understand for the first time that Shay had lost everybody, but rather than retreat, she doubled down. With a ferocity that stunned even her toughest critics. "You want to discuss toxicity?" She spat, her voice teeming with venom. "You want to discuss making people uncomfortable? Let me tell you something, Johnny Depp. I have been making people uncomfortable with truth for 40 years. I've been calling out liars and manipulators since before I were famous, and I am not going to stop now just because you do not like. I do not care about that." Johnny looked at her for a long space of time, and when he did speak again, his words were calm but charged with a strong sense of sadness, one that was still more devastating than any rod. "You know what the real tragedy is, sure, Whoopi. I used to respect you. I used to admire your work, your courage, your willingness to speak truth to power, but what you are doing right now is not truth. It is not courage. It is just cruelty." The words struck Whoopi with a physical force. For one instant, her mask fell away, and you could glimpse something most vulnerable in her face. Butte was flashed out in the next instant, placed with an even sharper edge. "Do not you dare lecture me about courage," she spotted. "Not you dare sit there and attempt to make me the villain in your tale. I am not the one in need of redemption here. I am not the one attempting to restore my reputation. I am not the one who dismantled my own career through my own decisions. No," Johnny spoke quietly. "You are the one killing your career right now in real time in front of all these people, and the worst part is that you do not even appear to notice it." The silence which followed was deafening. Even Whoopi appeared to be momentarily alarmed by the precision of his observation. The rest of the hosts were glaring at her with faces expressing disappointment, sheer disgust. The audience wassailing as a tomb, watching this train wreck destroy itself with ghoulish fascination. But Whoopi snapped out of it quickly, and when she resumed speaking, her tone had a cold finality that left everyone in the room tense. "Get out," she said flatly. Johnny blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Excuse me, you heard me? Get out? Get off my show. Security will escort you out if necessary, but you are don't here." The gasps from the audience were audible now. Joy was openly staring at Whoopi in shock, while Sarah and Sunny looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. This was unprecedented. The show's history and everyone knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Johnny looked around the room one more time, taking in the faces of the crew, the other hosts, and the audience members. How are witnessing this in progress? When he resumed speaking, his voice rang out with a dignity that made Whoopi's actions seem even more petty and vindictive. "By comparison, I will leave." He sought unruffled because I have too much respect for these other ladies and for this audience to pursue this any further, but I want all of you watching to know something. I came here today with an open heart and sincere respect for this show, and its purpose. What occurred here today was not my decision. It was not predetermined. It was an intentional choice by one individual to turn what should have been a discourse into a character assassination. He turned to the other host, his face relaxing joy. "Sarusini, I apologize you had to see this. You all are professionals and you deserve better than this." Then he turned it back to Whoopi, and his voice had acquiescent authority that filled the hall of studio. "And Whoopi, I hope one day you'd discover whatever part you are searching for, because this," he swept his arm around the room, "this is not it." With those dramatic words hanging there, Johnny started out for the door, but Whoopi was not done. Even as she watched him leave, she could not help but have one last batter. "That is right, walk away," she shouted after him, her voice ringing out in the shocked studio. "Just like you dole ways when things become tough. Just like you did when your marriage began to break down. Just like you did when your reputation collapsed. Walk away." And Beatty victim Johnny came to an abrupt halt. For a moment it seemed as though he would turn around and retaliate. The whole studio waited with bated breath to see whether this exchange would deteriorate further. Bade rather took a deep breath and kept in walking, demonstrating a restraint that caused Whoopi's ongoing attacks to appear even more desperate and pathetic. Security. Whoopi barked into her microphone, "Please remove Mr. Depp from." Building the irony was not lost in anyone there. Johnny was already voluntarily exiting with dignitance cathed, but Whoopi felt compelled to make it appear that he was being removed forcibly. Two security guards materialized, looking deeply uncomfortable. The scenario they approached Johnny respectfully Plain Lamarist at having been a skedto, do so, sir. You must leave the premises. One of them said softly, his voice apologetic. Johnny nodded gratefully. Of course, I realize. You're only doing your job. He turned Toothguard with a faint smile. I haven't been thrown out of better places than this. The remark was made with such impeccable timing and graciousness, stat a number of members of the audience sexual logaloo, in spite of the tension. Even some off-crew members were attempting to conceal smiles. Johnny had been able to retain his dignity and sense of humor. Even in this impossible circumstance, as the security guards walked alongside him Marin show, then in necessity Johnny approached Shed. Studio door, but just before he reached it, he turned back one last time. The cameras were still running, capturing each second of this historic confrontation. Ladies and gentlemen, he said to Theto the audience directly, I would like to thank you for your attention and time today. I am apologetic this did not quite go as intended, but things like that do occur sometimes. I hope y'all still consider viewing the film itis truly something special, and the crew and cast put their hearts into it. Even while being led away, he was still attempting to publicize his film and defend the people who had worked with him. The difference between his professionalism and Whoopi's reaction could not have been more dramatic. Get him out of here, Whoopi snapped, but her tone was now shrill and desperate. She had gone too far, and everyone knew it as Johnny walked through the door of the studio. The silence that followed was palpable. The other hosts sat as if frozen at their desk, unsure of what to do. Joy was clearly shaken. Sarah said it with anger, and Sunny seemed to be in a state of complete shock. The audience was just as shocked, some of them looking to another with the looks of surprise. Whoopi glanced around the room, perhaps finally coming to the realization of the enormity of what she had done, however, rather than expressing remorse and trying to recover from the situation. She doubled down one last time. That's what happens when individuals believe they can appear on this show and push the agenda. She spoke, her voice without its previous firmness. We hold individually accountable here. We ask the hard questions. If you can't deal with Thathan, you shouldn't be here. But her words didn't ring truth. The mood in the room had changed utterly. Where once there had been tension and argument, no, there was only a hollow awkwardness. The appeal of live TV had been lost, replaced by something ugly and unwanted. Joy at last spoke up. I think that one need to break to commercial, she said, softly looking straight into the camera. We'll be right back. While the recording lights faded into darkness, the studio exploded in hushed discussions. Crew members were nodding their heads, members themselves and the other hosts were looking at Whoopi with faces that were anywhere from disappointed to outraged. In the control room, producers were frantically attempting to determine how they could salvage the scene. This was not only terrible television, this was a public relations disaster that would have repercussions far longer than this one. Showdown episode phone calls were already being made to network executives, and social media was starting to implode with clips and commentary from viewers who had seen the confrontation. But perhaps the most revealing moment came from an unexpected quarter as the cows raged on around her. Whoopi sat alone at her desk, appearing smaller somehow than she had a few moments previously. The righteous fury which had driven her attack on Johnny had worn off, leaving in its place something which looked suspiciously like regret. A production assistant went to her. Whoopi Goldberg, the producers would like to talk to you. Whoopi looked open for a moment, her neatly constructed mask crumbled totally away. Merely doing my job, she said, but her voice was hardly more than a whisper. The assistant nodded tactfully and went away, leaving Whoopi to grapple with the aftermath of what she had done. About her, the machinery of television grounded, but something basic had been ruptured. Trust between host and guest, the minimum civility that permits live television, the respect each of us owes other in order to have meaningful talk of it, had been discarded for an instantive, vindictive pleasure that was already sounding hollow. In my ears, meanwhile, Johnny Depp strolled through the halls off studio building, still accompanied by security guards who were visibly elated with their part in this melodrama. As they rounded the corner toward the exit, one off guard said, Mr. Depp, I just wanted to say that I am sorry about what happened in there. That was no trite. Johnny paused and glanced at them with sincere appreciation. Thank you for saying that. It means Marethan, you know. As the doors opened, and Johnny walked out. Into the New York morning, he was met by a small group of fans who had congregated hoping to catch a glimpse of him. They had no idea what had just occurred within, but they cheered when he appeared coming out. Johnny waved at them with a smile that only seemed marginally faked, then got into the waiting automobile that would bear him away from this catastrophe. As the car drove away from the curb, he glanced back at the studio, building for the last time, perhaps wondering how a straightforward promotion interview had become such an open sensation. The tale of what occurred that day would go viral on social media, entertainment news, and gossip industry. News of the altercation would be posted millions of times, picked apart by commentators and parsed by media pundits. Johnny Depp's elegant response to an impossible product would be admired and sympathized with, while Whoopi Goldberg's conduct would be condemned and announced at the time as his car vanished in the sea of Manhattan traffic. Johnny Depp had done something that would be remembered years later. Controversy blew over. He had demonstrated that sometimes the strongest reaction to cruelty is to just keep your dignity, tell the truth, and walk away with head held. Hi, what did you think actually drove Whoopi Goldberg shocking? Conduct that day was a personal vendetta, professional rivalry, or something else? Together, drop your comments below, and do not forget to subscribe for more amazing tales from the entertainment world. The truth indeed is stranger than fiction.